A review of the Office of Personnel Management and its potential merger into the General Services Administration is complete. The National Academy of Public Administration says transferring some OPM duties to the Office of Management and Budget and merging others into GSA wouldn't have fixed problems at the agency. Michael Rigas is former Acting Director of the Office of Personnel Management, former Acting Deputy Director for Management at OMB, and former Acting Federal Chief Information Officer. Mike, it's great to see you. Thanks for coming on the program. A lot of the issues that NAPA took up were issues that were underway when you were at the agencies. What's your takeaway from what you read in the NAPA report?
Well, thank you, Francis. It's good to be with you again this morning. It looks like the NAPA report took a lot of the recommendations that we began under my tenure at OPM and at OMB. So there are a lot of recommendations I agree with. There are some recommendations I would not agree with, but overall I think they are addressing, or they speak to many of the items I was able to begin addressing under my tenure as OPM director. So I would certainly agree with their recommendation that OPM should be the sole personnel authority in the federal government. That's something that Congress would need to act on. I would agree with their recommendation that I.t modernization needs to happen. That's an area where we spent a lot of time at OPM. We made, in fact, a $70 million request to Congress for some urgently needed I.t modernization funds that we were really kind of shocked and dismayed that Congress denied that request. But we took I.t modernization very seriously at OPM under my tenure there. And in fact, the last two federal CIOs came from OPM. Our former chief of staff, who had tremendous experience in IT security, cybersecurity, and IT modernization, was a federal CIO under the Trump administration. And President Biden just named OPM's CIO as the federal CIO as well. So you can see how seriously we took the need for IT modernization at OPM. And finally, I would say I would agree with the report's recommendation that OPM should take a risk-based approach and be more decentralized and reduce administrative burden on agencies, which is one of the mantras I touted while I was the OPM director, is that we are there to serve the mission and needs of the federal government and to serve the needs of other federal agencies and to support the workforce. And we need to do everything we can to meet the needs and requests that are coming to us from agencies.
I take your points, Mike. The two main takeaways, though, that just about everybody has gotten out of this NAPA report, and Peter Levine and Janet Hale, two of the co-authors of this work, confirmed it on the program on Sunday. Two of the major takeaways were things that run contrary to the work that you were doing at OPM. That's the merger into the General Services Administration and moving some of the functions to OMB. And the other one is just the fact that you served as OPM director, albeit acting, at the same time you were DDM. Same thing happened during the Obama administration, but those were two things that the Trump administration really was at least okay with. And yet this NAPA report says not a great idea.
Well, I would agree. So I would agree that what we did at during my tenure there, we had actually put the merger on hold. We sort of stopped pursuing any further activity on that because Congress did not act on the administration's legislative proposal. So that was something we actually stopped under my tenure as the OPM acting director, because we had always recognized that it required congressional action to do that. And Congress, I think, made pretty clear that they did not want to move forward with that. But we still saw that there was an urgent need for reform at OPM. And we pivoted to focus on what we could do to help support OPM as a standalone entity. I was dual-hatted for most of my tenure, for most of 2020, most of the year, as both the OPM director and the deputy director for management at OMB. And as you noted in the report notes, that's been done several times before in the past. This was the first time that the dual hat came from OPM rather than from OMB. And one of the things I made sure to emphasize in my OMB hat was that OPM was the sole and would be, I would conduct myself as the sole personnel authority in the federal government as OPM acting director, even though those authorities were also granted by Congress to the DDM. And one of the things I think Congress needs to revisit is to remove that responsibility from the DDM role, because the DDM role has tremendous responsibilities as it is already. It oversees federal information technology, federal financial management, federal procurement, and just overall management responsibility for the federal government. And I think I think it was sort of well-intentioned, the CFO Act of 1990, to have the DDM also responsible for oversight of personnel matters. But I think, I think time has demonstrated that that really hasn't worked out as well as it was intended. And I think that can still sort of be achieved because the OPM director also sits on the President's Management Council, which is chaired by the Deputy Director for Management at OMB and includes all of the cabinet level deputy secretaries. It includes the GSA administrator. And I think that would be a more appropriate venue to engage from OMB to discuss with OPM and other agencies on personnel matters rather than giving that statutory responsibility to the DDM.
Mike, there's always more ideas than there is time to talk about them. I have to have you come back and talk more. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Francis.